Well, thank you, Alderwoman Mitch. That timing was perfect. The sun started to shine as soon as she said Mayor Brandon Johnson, but the sun is shining on the city of Chicago. So congratulations to the city of Chicago for your commitment and patience. So let's give yourself a nice round of applause. The greatest city in the entire world. Alderwoman Mitch, I appreciate your leadership, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We are here today because the federal government has taken a critical action to approve a disaster declaration for the state of Illinois, Cook County, and the city of Chicago following last month's severe storms and flooding. Communities throughout Chicago and Cook County, particularly those on the west side, are still reeling from significant damage to homes and businesses. After the storms in June and July, the city of Chicago immediately jumped into action to help our residents and families recover. We brought the full force of government to the west side of Chicago and all over the city to provide the type of relief that our people deserve. Now, I will say this: when the storms begin to increase, I didn't realize so many folks on the west side had my cell phone number. And the reason why we're in this position is because the people of Chicago came together. And when we talk about the full force of government, that includes the Department of Streets and Sanitation, the Chicago Department of Transportation, the Office of Emergency Management and Communication, the Chicago Police Department, the Chicago Fire Department, the Department of Water Management, and the Department of Family and Support Services. We did whatever we had to do in that moment to make sure that we were here for our residents. And the 311 calls, we received, you all, over 12,000 calls for service due to flooding. From July 4th to the 12th, DSS, DWM, CDOT collected over 5.5 million pounds of storm damaged debris and damaged property. We dispatched city workers, including myself, to tour the hardest hit communities to assess the damage and to hear from those directly who were impacted. And as I walked through my neighborhood, my heart ached to see the pain and the damage caused by the storm. And as you all know, the city of Chicago, we're known for a lot of different things. Our basements are just as much a part of the history of Chicago as house music and Uncle Remus. Because it's in the basements where childcare is provided. Yes. It's in the basement where families provide support for individuals who need somewhere to lay their head. Yeah. It's where our memories are stored. Yeah. Back in the 90s is where we used to, we won't discuss that. We used to get down, Reverend Jake's, in the basement. But Reverend Jake's been saved all his life, so I'm not sure about that. But we authorized streets and sanitation workers to assist in the cleanup, prioritizing the elderly and disabled neighbors. We also made sure that my Deputy Mayor of Business and Neighborhood Development, Kenya Merritt, as well as our COO, John Robertson, joined forces with community leaders to distribute supplies to help people clean up. Here's the part that I'm incredibly impressed by, is that for the first time in the history of Chicago, we had city workers not just clearing up alleys, but literally going into the basements of residents to help them clean up and clear out the damage. That has never happened before. That's the soul of Chicago. And as long as I'm mayor of the city of Chicago, we're not going to leave anyone behind. In fact, I'm going to close with this. I was at an event on the south side of Chicago, the Silver Room, and I ran into one of our workers. And he came up to me and he said, "Thank you, Mr. Mayor." And I said, "What are you thanking me for? I haven't been in office long enough to get too many thank yous." He said, "Thank you for giving me the opportunity to serve our community. And I'm a part of the streets and sanitation team. And I've been going through alleys and basements to help our people recover." I said, "You're thanking me. I should be thanking you." And you know what he said? He said, "Austin raised me." He said, "It is my privilege to go help support the very families who raised me." That's what this moment has yielded. that the full force of government on full display to make sure that there's real relief for families. And so with that, I'm grateful to every level of government that has participated, as Alderwoman Mintz has already articulated. The federal government, Biden administration, thank you. To the state of Illinois, to Cook County government, to Water Reclamation District. I'm joined by my colleagues at City Council, Alderwoman Cruz, Scott, the 30th and the 24th Ward, and to Michelle Harris on the south side, the 8th Ward. The full force of government is on display, but I want residents and owners of businesses to go to disasterassistance.gov. The number is 800-621-3362. Or, of course, you can use the FEMA app, which we'll get into a little bit later. But thank you all. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Chesney. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. For people who wanted to apply for funding, is there a specific dollar amount they could qualify for? And for the entire Cook County region, is there a lump sum that has been allotted? And the second question was if there's any updated figures on how many homes have been impacted. I don't know if we've heard that recently.
Thank you for that question. It's a great question. And, as we set up operations here with Andrew Friend here on the ground, first and foremost, it's about getting everybody to apply for federal assistance. And we are fully resourced to support this disaster financially and with the appropriate staff who are here to support this disaster and help these communities affected by it come back to recovery. We don't have any issues that I'm concerned with of any kind of financial shortfalls. So we're here to help, and we want to make sure that the first thing we want to tackle is getting everybody to register, and then we'll go from there. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions directed to the mayor?
And the registration, by the way, October 16th is the deadline. Is that right? Well, we need people to register. So again, October 16th, we need those registrants to do that as soon as possible.
Hi, Mayor.
That's the number. Sure. In the number of homes that were affected, I can speak for the western suburbs, especially Cicero. I would say about over 25,000 homes were devastated in this past storm.
Thank you.
Hi, Mayor. Following the record floods in July, some residents had told WBZ they were frustrated because at the time they hadn't gotten calls back from 311. With the 311 system, one of the primary ways the city identifies folks affected by floods. Are you advocating for federal dollars at all to help improve that system? Or are there any plans in place to make 311 more responsive as we continue to see
Well, as you saw,
floods?
thank you for that question. As you saw, the full force of government on display. You had an unprecedented response from government, from my office and the city that we have never seen before. The reason why we're in a position to receive the type of support that we're going to get from the federal government is because the 311 system worked. Right? That's in essence, that's how the calculation is determined. Now, look, it's government. Are there systems that have to be strengthened? Of course. But make no mistake about it. For the first time in the history of Chicago, we've had a response from every single level of government where city workers on weekends were going through alleys, going into people's basements, because we're not going to leave people behind. We're not just talking about constituents. These are our neighbors. And that's why the county government is here, state government is here, federal government is here. I live in Austin. Who has more of an incentive for the west side of Chicago to come up out of the damage that we've experienced over the course of decades than someone who's raising a family in Austin? That's right. So look, will we strengthen and continue to build our infrastructure? Absolutely. And it was on full display throughout this entire process. And I'm grateful that my colleagues from the city council are here. It's so good to see the Cook County commissioners. I think they're really here because they just miss me. But thank you for that question. Thank you all. Okay.
Mayor Johnson has time for one more question from the media, and then our other representatives will be available.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Trey Arline from Block Club Chicago. I wanted to ask, what is the overall long-term plan to ensure flooding like this can be prevented on the west side in the future?
Yeah, look, that's a very good question. And I think Commissioner Aguilar, we've worked together on the county side to discuss this very dynamic, and I appreciate your question, brother. I do. Look, clearly climate change is real. the earth is speaking loud and clear. Because at the time in which this unprecedented levels of rain that fell, you had extreme heat in the western part of the country. Well over 100 degrees. Wildfires breaking out. We had smoke coming in from Canada. We had floods coming. My wife said, if the locusts come, Brandon, you better repent. The type of infrastructure that we're going to need to transform the city of Chicago is quite apparent. And that's everything from removing, lead pipes that have plagued our communities and has caused, damage, to making sure that, again, that we have mitigation in place to be able to address, what is likely to be some level of reoccurrence. And so, again, from the federal to the state to county to local municipalities, we're all committed to making sure that we have resources. Particularly, there's some excitement around the Inflation Reduction Act that can provide opportunity for not just mitigation, but more green technology to ensure long-term sustainability. So I appreciate you all being here today. And again, do not forget, October 16th is the deadline. Use your applications. Also use that number, and to know that we're not going to leave anybody behind in the city of Chicago. Thank you all very much.
So the mayor has a couple of other activities that he has to leave to. We'll open up the floor for media questions to some of our other partners who are on stage. Do we have any media questions?
I'm Brandon with WBBM News Radio. I'm just curious who might be able to speak. I know there's an October 16th deadline to register, but how quickly could someone expect if the relief comes in the form of monetary? When could people expect to see that money in their bank accounts?
Where are you?
It's right there, cup hat.
Oh, with the cup. Oh, there you go. One more time. How soon? How early?
Yeah. I know who's administering the aid, like the funding. Would it be the Small Business Administration for some aspects of it, and then the residential stuff handled by someone else? And then October 16th is the deadline. How soon could people expect to start seeing some of this funding come into their bank accounts?
Sure. Well, Andrew Friend, Federal Coordinating Officer with FEMA, and that can be a very quick process. What's important is everybody's story is different on their road to recovery, so the types of access they have to funding might be different looking on what they experienced and what was damaged. That being said, the quickest way to get that funding, if you're eligible, is to do that application with FEMA. And again, that's disasterassistance.gov, or the phone number, 1-800-621-3364, and start that road to recovery. I could say that once people are registered and deemed eligible, part of that process is having the housing inspectors come out to look at their properties. So that's why it's so important that if you get that phone call from a strange number, to pick that up, because that will certainly delay your funding. If you don't pick that up and have that housing inspector come and inspect your property, again, that could greatly slow down that process. So pick up that number, but the first step on here is to get registered. And again, the 3 ways to do that is disasterassistance.gov, downloading the FEMA mobile application, or the number, which is 1-800-621-3362. 1-800-621-3362.
Could I follow up to that, please? So do you have just like a roundabout, like weeks, months? I know sometimes when people are expecting relief, like the small venues, it took 16, 18 months for them to get some of the funding that was allocated to them. Is this going to be weeks or months?
So on the individual assistance side, once the housing inspector comes and inspects the house and they are deemed eligible, it can be days for that money to hit that account. But again, everyone's situation is a bit different, so it's navigating that process, and the way to navigate that process is getting in touch with FEMA.
Good afternoon. I think I might have a question for you, Andrew, as well. Don't go far. Whoever wants to answer this question, actually, because so many of the folks that we're talking about may not have internet access or may not be internet savvy. I see aldermen shaking their heads, alderpersons shaking their heads. Sorry, I don't want to disrespect. What is your plan in terms of, you said you were going to open some of these centers. What is your plan to try and help the folks, perhaps older residents and folks who don't have access to do these applications?
Sure. So the quickest way for those that don't have access to the internet or say a smartphone to download the application would be calling the number. So again, that's 1-800-621-3362. But I'm happy to also report we're going to have what's called disaster survivor assistance teams who are literally going to be hitting the ground tomorrow morning, going through these impacted communities, and they're going to be there to link up with the survivor, and they can actually help them. They're on their doorstep to do their application. Eventually, the disaster recovery centers will open up, and folks can come in there in person and seek support as well. But you don't have to wait. You can call that number right now.
The timeline for opening centers.
The timeline for opening those centers, we're working with our state and local partners to identify the best locations moving forward. That is one of our top priorities to get these centers open, so we're working to make that happen as quickly as possible. As quickly as possible. It's our number one priority.
Yeah, I just wanted to answer on behalf of all of the elected officials on the west side what we're doing right now, and I'm encouraging everyone to do, and I'm sure they are doing it, is we're putting the information out in the community, created a flyer with the information, taking it and passing it out to anyone and everyone. As we had the flood and had meetings. Sorry about that. Okay, sorry. We're passing out flyers to the community. That 1-800 number, that FEMA website number, to make sure that people know. And some people that are not watching the news, that don't have the internet, we want to make sure they get it. And every time we give it to someone, we are telling them to pass it on and keep passing the word out. And we're going to connect with all the residents. In fact, they're coming to the office to pick that information up. They will be contacting us once they know that, how do I get assistance? They don't have to hear it, they just want to know how can they get, and we'll pass that information on. So we're asking the media to do the same thing, keep putting the number out, and also the website number, or having to download the FEMA app. Don't forget, deadline, which is crucial for all of us, October the 16th. We don't want anyone left behind. And then when you get that phone call, it will probably be an out-of-state number, so you'll have an opportunity to answer it. I'm told approximately about 3 times, if you don't catch your call, you might drop off the call. So we don't want anyone to miss out. That's important for us to get that information out as well. There are a couple of things for non-for-profit organization as well as for-profit business and residents. So I would encourage everyone to follow the guidelines of what FEMA is instructing them to do. If they tell you that you need to call SBA, then you call them. And whatever steps, don't just say, I don't need, because you don't know what would happen. If you don't complete your steps, you won't get referred back to FEMA to get that assistance. So I just want to make sure that we are communicating all the information, and we will. Thank you.
I'm Joe Barrett with the Wall Street Journal. Want to ask Commissioner Aguilar, can you talk a little bit about whether you think this was sort of a failure of our flood control system, and what we kind of need to do to be more resilient going forward?
All levels of government have to be involved in this, especially our federal government. We need to invest more money on infrastructure, on drainage. I mean, they built the water reclamation facility back in 1889, and these over 100 years, all we did was just mandate it. They need uplift. They need billions of dollars to upgrade the system, billions of dollars to upgrade our drainage system. We need help. It's a federal issue. This is not one local community's issue. It's a regional. We need much more investment from our federal government.
I just wanted to follow up because we heard the warning that there are always fraudsters out there. So this call that you might be getting from a number you don't recognize, that's usually a tip that you don't pick up, right? So can you just give us a little bit more information? If you do get a call from a number you don't recognize, what are they going to be asking for and what maybe not to give out? Like, how are you going to know this is actually a representative of FEMA or IMA?
Sure. Well, first, you need to register. So if you get the call and you haven't registered, there's a problem there, right? But once you register and you get that out-of-state call, they're going to be making contact, identifying who they are. They're going to be verifying some information with your application number, and then scheduling that visit. If you are unsure or uncomfortable, you can ask them for their name. You can hang up and say, I need you to call me back. I need to verify who you are. You can hang up the phone. You can call the FEMA number and say, hey, I'm so-and-so. I think I got called by a housing inspector, but I want to double check that. And you can verify with that number if they actually are who they say they are. And that's the same for a housing inspector or the disaster survivor assistance teams that go around and literally knock on every door to help people register that might not be able to otherwise. And also, too, to see if there's any urgent needs out in the community. FEMA and the SBA will never ask for payment. If anyone's asking you for payment or for money, that is not us. That is 100% fraud. What they will be doing is confirming information that's on your application, including your application number, that would not be possible for a fraudster to get, okay? And again, if you're unsure, you feel uncomfortable, say, hey, I need your information to call you back. You can call the FEMA hotline number, verify with them before you press forward. But unfortunately, during times of disasters, there are those folks that try to take advantage of the good people and the survivors who already went through so much. So it's important to us that everybody's safe.
Got it. Any other questions from media for our folks up